Elderly man is stopped from entering party. But when a man recognizes him, the unbelievable happens. The lights of the hall shone brightly as elegant guests paraded their finest clothes. The sound of laughter and animated conversation echoed through the main corridor. But at the entrance, a completely different scene was unfolding under the curious gazes of some passers-by. Walter felt his hands tremble as he held a yellowed envelope. The security guard in front of him crossed his arms with a look of contempt, completely blocking the passage. "I already told you, you cannot come in," the man in the black suit said, his voice cutting through the air like a razor. "But I have an invitation, son. Look here." Walter raised the envelope with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. The security guard didn't even look at the paper. "That must be some old thing you found somewhere. This party is only for special guests. Do you really think someone would invite you dressed like that?" Walter looked down at his own clothes. The beige jacket was worn at the cuffs, the blue shirt had some poorly sewn tears, and his pants were dirty from the long journey he had made. He had no money for better clothes. He had used his last savings just to get there. "Please, it's very important." The elderly man's voice came out weak, almost a whisper. "I need to deliver this personally." "Deliver what?" The security guard took a step forward, intimidating. "Look, old man, don't make me call for backup. Get out of here before I remove you by force." Some guests began to stop and watch. A woman in a red dress pointed at Walter while whispering something to her companion. A man in a tuxedo laughed loudly as he passed by, making some nasty comment that Walter couldn't quite hear. "Robert, what is happening here?" A firm voice came from the corridor. The security guard turned immediately, straightening his posture. "Nothing serious, Dr. Michael. Just a beggar trying to take advantage of the party." Michael approached with determined steps. He wore an immaculate blue suit, a perfectly aligned tie, and shoes that shone under the lights. Everything about him conveyed success and authority. His dark eyes quickly analyzed the situation. "Beggar?" Michael looked at Walter for the first time. The world seemed to stop at that moment. The elderly man slowly raised his eyes, meeting the gaze of the younger man. There was something familiar about those features, about that way of tilting his head slightly to the side when thinking. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. Your name." The words came hesitantly from Michael's lips. "What is your name?" "Walter," replied the elderly man, his voice choked. "Walter Johnson." The envelope slipped from Walter's hands, falling onto the polished marble floor. Michael took 2 steps back as if he had been punched in the stomach. His face lost all color. "It can't be," Michael murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "Dr. Michael, do you know this man?" Robert asked, confused by his boss's reaction. Michael didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on Walter, searching every wrinkle, every strand of grey hair, every detail of that face, marked by time and suffering. His hands began to tremble. 42 years, Walter's voice came out hoarse, filled with emotion. "It's been 42 years since I last saw you, my son." A heavy silence fell over the corridor. The guests watching the scene were dumbfounded. Robert looked from one to the other, completely lost. "My father is dead," Michael said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "My mother told me. He abandoned us and never came back." "I never abandoned anyone." Tears began to stream down Walter's wrinkled face. "I left to protect you. To protect you and your mother." Michael felt his legs go weak. He leaned against the wall, trying to process what he was hearing. Old memories began to surface in his mind, fragments of a past he had tried to forget. The blurry image of a man lifting him into the air, making him laugh. The smell of sawdust and wood glue. Large calloused hands teaching his small hands how to hold a hammer. "This doesn't make sense." Michael shook his head, as if he could push those memories away. "My mother said you left with another woman, that you wanted nothing to do with us." "Your mother?" Walter closed his eyes, an expression of pain crossing his face. "She did what she thought was best at the time, but that's not how it happened." "Then tell me." Michael stepped forward, grabbing the elderly man by the shoulders. "Tell me how it was. Why did you disappear?" Why did you let me believe my father didn't love me?" The guests around them were completely frozen, witnessing this moment of pure emotion. An older woman with silver hair brought her hand to her chest, visibly moved by the scene. "I loved you more than anything." Walter held his son's wrists, his hands trembling but firm in that gesture. "And that's why I had to leave. There were people looking for me, dangerous people. I owed money, a lot of money. I tried to hide. I tried to handle it alone. But I couldn't. They threatened you. They threatened to hurt a 6-year-old boy because of my debts." Michael let go of his father's shoulders, taking a step back. His mind raced, trying to fit the pieces of that story with everything he had always believed to be true. "So, you ran away." There was a mixture of anger and confusion in Michael's voice. "You left me alone thinking it was my fault. I spent years wondering what I had done wrong for my father to leave." "It wasn't your fault," Walter's voice broke. "Never was. I made a deal. I left town, promised never to return, never to make contact again. In exchange, they would leave you alone. Your mother knew part of the truth, but not all of it. I asked her to tell you that I had left with another woman. It was better for you to hate me than to live in fear." But 42 years. Michael ran his hands over his face, trying to control the emotions threatening to overflow. 42 years without a word, without a sign of life. And now, you show up here, like this, at the opening of my hotel. I tried to stay away. Walter picked up the envelope from the floor, holding it against his chest. "God knows I tried. But when I saw your name in the paper, when I read about this hotel, about everything you've achieved, I couldn't anymore. I needed to see you one last time. I needed to ask for forgiveness before I leave." "Leave for where?" Michael asked, something in his father's voice frightening him. Walter opened the envelope with trembling hands. From inside, he took out some folded papers and an old photo, faded by time. He handed the photo to Michael. In the image, a young man held a small boy on his shoulders. Both were smiling at the camera. Michael recognized the boy immediately. It was him. And the young man in the photo had the same eyes as the elderly man before him. "I kept this with me all these years," Walter said softly. "It was all I had of you. Sometimes I would spend hours looking at it, trying to imagine how you were, what you were doing, if you were happy." Michael held the photo with trembling fingers. Long-buried memories began to resurface with full force. The smell of his father, the sound of his laughter, the feeling of safety when he was carried on those strong shoulders. "The papers." Walter handed over the documents. "They're medical exams. I found out 6 months ago. I don't have much time left." Michael took the papers, his eyes quickly scanning the technical words. "Diagnosis, advanced stage, palliative treatment." The words danced on the page, each one a blow to his chest. "No," Michael murmured. "No, this can't be happening. You can't just appear in my life after 42 years only to tell me you're going to leave again." "I didn't want to." Tears streamed freely down Walter's face. "But I needed to see you one last time. I needed you to know the truth, that I never stopped loving you, that not a single day went by that I didn't think of you." Robert, the security guard, still watched everything, unsure how to react. The other guests began to disperse, some whispering quietly about the dramatic scene, others visibly moved. An elegant woman approached. She was about 65, with dark hair pulled back into an elegant bun, wearing a navy blue dress that accentuated her upright and dignified posture. "Michael," she called softly. "Is everything all right?" Michael turned to her, his face wet with tears he hadn't even realized he was shedding. "Mrs. Catherine," his voice came out choked. I don't know what to do." Catherine was the hotel manager, a woman Michael deeply respected. She had been like a second mother to him in recent years, ever since they started working together on the hotel project. Catherine's eyes moved from Michael to Walter. Something passed over her face, surprise, recognition. And then, something that looked like terror. "Walter," she whispered, the color draining from her cheeks. The elderly man looked at her, and his eyes widened. "Catherine." Catherine Wilson. You know Mr. Walter, Mrs. Catherine. Michael looked between the two, confused. Catherine took a step back, a hand going to the pearl necklace at her throat. She began, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. How long has it been? Walter asked, his voice laden with an emotion Michael couldn't identify. 30 years? 35? 37, Catherine answered automatically, as if that number were etched in her memory. Michael looked from one to the other, completely lost. Can someone please explain what is happening here? Catherine closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When she opened them again, there was determination in them. Your father and I, she began, looking directly at Michael. We met many years ago, after he had already left your town. You knew? Michael turned to Walter. You knew Mrs. Catherine all this time? Not all this time. Walter shook his head. We met in New York City, years after I left you and your mother. I was working on a construction site. Catherine was a secretary in a nearby office. We became friends, Catherine continued, her voice firmer now. He never told me his real name. He used another name, said he was running from a past he couldn't reveal. Michael felt as if the ground were disappearing beneath his feet. Were you together? He asked, and there was an implicit accusation in the question. No, they both answered at the same time. Catherine sighed deeply. I fell in love with him, she admitted, and there was pain in her voice. But he could never return it. There was someone else in his heart, even after all those years, and a son he could never forget. Walter looked at Michael with intensity. I told Catherine everything about you, about your mother, about what I had done. She was the only person I trusted completely in those years. And yet, Michael looked at Catherine with a mixture of betrayal and confusion. You never told me. All these years working together, watching me build this hotel, listening to my stories about my father who abandoned me, and you never said anything? Catherine had tears in her eyes now. He made me promise. Her voice was a whisper. Made me swear I would never say anything. That he would never try to find you. He wanted to protect you. He always wanted to protect you. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It's a great help to us who are just starting out. Now, back to the story. Protect me from what? Michael practically shouted. From having a father? From knowing the truth? From the people who were looking for me, Walter answered. I never knew when I would truly be safe. Every time I thought about coming back, about trying to see you, something would happen to remind me that there was still danger. A strange phone call. A man who seemed to be following me. I couldn't take the risk. But you took a risk now, Michael pointed out. Why? What changed? Walter touched his chest, right over his heart. Because I am dying, he said simply. And I realized that dying without you knowing the truth would be the greatest cowardice of all. It would be leaving you to believe a lie forever. Michael turned away, unable to look at his father at that moment. His mind was in a whirlwind. 42 years of anger, of abandonment, of unanswered questions. And now, in a matter of minutes, everything he thought he knew was crumbling. Michael. Catherine's voice was soft. I know this is difficult, but he is telling the truth. I saw him suffer all these years. I saw him struggle with the decision to stay away. And I saw the love he has always had for you. Love? Michael laughed, but it was a bitter sound without joy. What kind of love lets a child believe he was abandoned? The kind of love that is willing to suffer so that the son can live in safety. Walter took a step forward. Do you think it was easy for me? Do you think there was a single day when I didn't think about coming back? But every time I considered it, I remembered the threats. I remembered what they could do to you. And now? Michael turned abruptly. Do those people still exist? Walter shook his head slowly. I don't know, maybe yes, maybe no, but what does it matter now? My days are numbered. They can't hurt me more than I am already being hurt. Robert, who had remained silent during the entire revelation, finally spoke up. Dr. Michael, the party. The guests are waiting. What would you like me to do? Michael looked at the security guard as if he had completely forgotten where he was. The party. The grand opening. Everything he had meticulously planned for months. Cancel everything, he said abruptly. Cancel? Robert's eyes widened. But, sir, you heard what I said. Michael cut him off. Cancel the party. Tell the guests there has a family emergency. Because there has. Catherine touched Michael's arm gently. Don't do this, she said. This hotel is your dream. You worked so hard for this moment. My dream. Michael looked at Walter. My dream was always to have my father be proud of me. And he was here, but I never knew. He never got to see. But I saw, Walter said, his voice full of emotion. I always saw every newspaper article about you, every mention on television, every achievement. I kept everything. I have a box full of clippings, of photos, of everything I could find about you over the years. Michael felt a lump in his throat. You followed my life. From afar, always from afar, Walter nodded. When you graduated from college, I was there, at the back of the auditorium, hidden among the other parents. When you opened your first company, I walked past the building every day of the first week, just to see you go in and out. When you got married, you were at my wedding? Michael interrupted, disbelieving. Outside the church, Walter confirmed. I couldn't go in, but I heard the ceremony through the open door. I saw you smile at your bride, and I cried from happiness and sadness at the same time. My God! Michael covered his face with his hands. All this time? You were there all that time? And when your marriage ended, Walter continued, his voice breaking, when I read about the divorce 4 years later, my heart broke for you. I wanted so much to be there, to comfort you, to say everything would be all right. Michael let the tears fall freely now. There was no holding them back anymore. Catherine called me. Walter looked at the woman next to Michael. She knew I was following everything from afar. She called to tell me you were in a bad way, that you needed support. But I couldn't go. I was still afraid of bringing trouble to you. I tried to convince him, Catherine said to Michael. Many times. But he was stubborn, always putting your safety above his own happiness. Michael looked at Catherine with new eyes. You've been protecting me all this time? You and him? I promised I would look after you, Catherine admitted. When Walter found out I had gotten a job at your company years ago, he made me swear I would protect you, that I would keep an eye on you without you knowing. That's why, Michael began to connect the dots. That's why you were always there. In every difficult moment, in every important decision, I thought you were just a good friend, a mentor. I am your friend, Catherine said firmly. That was never a lie. But it was also a promise I made to a man I loved, even if he could never love me in the same way. Walter looked at Catherine with gratitude and sadness. You deserved more, he said to her. You deserved someone who could give you a complete love, not someone stuck in the past like me. Everyone makes their own choices, Catherine replied with dignity. I chose to help you. I chose to care for the son you loved so much, and I don't regret it. Robert cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional intensity of the situation. Dr. Michael, the guests are starting to ask, what should I tell them? Michael took a deep breath, trying to regain some composure. Tell them that in 15 minutes I will make an announcement, he decided. Everyone should gather in the main hall. You're going to continue with the party? Walter asked, surprised. No, Michael looked at his father. I'm going to do something better. I'm going to introduce my father to everyone. I'm going to tell the truth. Michael, no. Walter shook his head vigorously. You don't need to do that. You don't need to expose yourself like that. I spent 42 years ashamed of not having a father, Michael said in a firm voice. I won't spend one more minute ashamed of having you. Walter let out a sob, covering his mouth with his hand. Catherine also had tears streaming down her face. But first, Michael looked at his father. I need to know everything, every detail, every part of the story you hid. I don't want any more secrets between us. Walter nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I'll tell you everything, he promised. Absolutely everything. Michael looked at Robert. Take my father to my private office. Give him water, coffee, whatever he needs, and treat him with the respect he deserves. This is Walter Johnson, my father. Robert looked ashamed of his earlier behavior. Yes, sir. I apologize for the way I treated you before. You didn't know, Walter said kindly to the security guard. And you were just doing your job. Catherine touched Michael's arm. I'll go with him, she offered, and I'll make sure everything is ready for your announcement. Michael nodded, watching as Catherine and Robert led Walter down the hallway. His father looked so fragile walking between them, so small and tired. It was hard to reconcile that image with the memories beginning to resurface of the strong man who carried him on his shoulders. Alone in the hallway, Michael leaned against the wall, allowing himself a moment of weakness. His entire life had been built on a lie created with good intentions perhaps, but a lie nonetheless. He thought of his mother, who had passed away 10 years ago. She had taken the secret to her grave. She had never told him the truth about his father. Was there anger in that? Yes. But there was also a dawning understanding. She had done what she thought was best to protect him. Michael pushed himself away from the wall and started walking toward the main hall. Guests greeted him, made comments about the beauty of the hotel, congratulated him on his success. He smiled mechanically, answered automatically, but his mind was somewhere else. When he reached the hall, he stood at the entrance for a moment, observing. Everything there represented years of hard work, of sacrifice, of determination. But for what? To prove what? That he had managed to be successful even without a father, that he didn't need anyone. And now he was discovering that his father had always been there, in the shadows perhaps, but present, watching, cheering, loving from a distance. Michael, a woman's voice called him. He turned to see Jennifer, his ex-wife, approaching. She wore an elegant green dress, her blonde hair pulled up in a high ponytail. Even after 5 years apart, she was still beautiful. Jennifer, he greeted, surprised. I didn't know you were coming. You invited me, she reminded him with a sad smile. And I wanted to come. I know how much this hotel means to you. Michael looked at her, really looked, for the first time in years. He saw the small wrinkles around her eyes, the tiredness she tried to hide with makeup, the sadness that still resided in her gaze. We made a lot of mistakes, didn't we? He said softly. Jennifer seemed surprised by the remark. We did, she agreed, but we also had good times. We did, Michael nodded. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything I wasn't able to be for you. Michael, it's all right. It's in the past. Jennifer touched his arm gently. We've both moved on. You moved on, Michael corrected. I heard you're engaged. A blush rose to Jennifer's cheeks. I was waiting for the right time to tell you in person, she admitted. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. I'm happy for you, Michael said, and he was sincere. Truly, you deserve to be happy. And you? Jennifer asked, studying him. Are you happy, Michael? He opened his mouth to answer, but hesitated. Was he? Before that evening, he would have said yes. He had success, money, respect. But now, with all those revelations, he was no longer sure what happiness meant. I'm finding out, he answered finally. I'm finding out what really matters. Jennifer seemed about to say something more, but was interrupted by the arrival of Catherine, who approached quickly. Michael, she called softly, your father is in the office. He asked me to get you. He says he needs to tell you something urgent before you make any announcement. Michael nodded, excusing himself from Jennifer before following Catherine down the hallway. His heart beat faster with each step. What else could there be? What other secrets were about to be revealed? When they entered the office, they found Walter sitting in a leather armchair, holding a cup of coffee with trembling hands. Robert was standing near the door, looking uncomfortable. Father, Michael said, and the word felt strange on his tongue after so many years. Catherine said you need to tell me something. Walter looked up, and there was fear in his eyes. Sit down, son, he requested. What I'm going to tell you, it won't be easy to hear. Michael sat in the chair opposite his father, feeling a weight in his stomach. I told you about the debts, Walter began. About the threats. But I didn't tell you everything about how I started owing money. It doesn't matter anymore, Michael started. But Walter interrupted him. It matters, he insisted, because it has to do with this hotel. Michael went still. What? Walter set the cup aside with trembling hands. The land where this hotel was built, he said slowly. It was mine. Or it should have been. Michael felt as if he had been struck by lightning. What do you mean? 45 years ago I bought this land, Walter explained. It was all I had, all my savings. I was going to build a house here for our family, for you, your mother, and me. Michael looked around the office as if he could see through the walls to the land outside. But then, Walter continued, his voice heavy with regret, I made a bad deal. A man convinced me to use the land as collateral for a loan. He said we could triple the money in a few months. I believed him. I was young, foolish, desperate to give you all a better life. And you lost everything, Michael finished, beginning to understand. Worse, Walter shook his head. The deal was a fraud. The man disappeared with the money, and I was left owing not only the loan but the outrageous interest that came with it. The creditors took the land, and when that still wasn't enough, they started to threaten me. They threatened you. Michael stood up abruptly, walking to the window. Outside he could see the city lights, the well-kept grounds around the hotel. Are you telling me, his voice came out controlled, but there was emotion just below the surface, that this place, this hotel I built, is on the land that should have been our home? Yes, Walter confirmed. When I saw the announcement that you had bought this land years ago, I wanted so much to tell you. But I was afraid that it would bring back all that dark past. Catherine, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. I knew, she admitted. Walter told me when Michael bought the land. I tried to investigate discreetly, to see who the previous owners were, how it had passed from hand to hand over the years. And what did you find out? Michael turned to her. It was sold and resold many times, Catherine explained. Each transaction shady, each transfer questionable, until it eventually reached the clean market and you were able to buy it legally. Michael went back to the chair, sitting down heavily. So, without knowing it, I got back the land you lost, he said, almost not believing it. I built here what you always dreamed of building. But you did so much more. Walter leaned forward. You didn't just build a house, you built an empire. This hotel, your companies, everything you've achieved. You took what I lost through weakness and turned it into something magnificent. It wasn't weakness, Michael said firmly. It was love. You tried to give the best for your family. I can't blame you for that. But there's more, Walter hesitated. The man who tricked me, who stole everything from me. Who was he? Michael asked. Walter looked at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. His name was Richard Thompson. Michael turned pale. Richard Thompson, he repeated. The same Richard Thompson who owns the rival construction company? Yes, Walter confirmed. The same. Michael stood up again, this time with anger evident in his movements. Richard Thompson has been trying to destroy me for years, he said, his voice tense. He tries to sabotage every project of mine, spreads rumors, tries to steal my clients. I always thought it was just normal business competition, but now you know, Catherine completed. He knows who you are. He knows you are Walter's son. How? Michael looked between the two. How could he know? Because I confronted him, Walter admitted, lowering his head, about 15 years ago. I was desperate, trying to raise money for a medical treatment. I went to him, I begged for help, I reminded him of what he had done to me. He laughed in my face and sent me away. But before that, I mentioned you. I mentioned that my son was starting to succeed in business. Michael clenched his fists, trying to control his rising anger. So, all these years, all the attacks on my business were personal? He practically spat the words. He was getting back at you through me? It wasn't revenge, Walter corrected. It was fear. Fear that one day you would discover the truth and confront him. Fear that you would become successful enough to destroy him. And I am, Michael said, a realization dawning on him. I have exactly what I need to finish him. No, Walter stood up, despite his trembling legs. That's not why I told you. I don't want you to become like him, consumed by revenge. He destroyed you, Michael pointed out. He destroyed our family. Because of him, I grew up without a father. Because of him, you spent 42 years alone, afraid, in hiding. And if you destroy him, what will that make you? Walter asked. Will it bring back the lost years? Will it change what happened? Michael opened his mouth to answer, but found no words. Catherine approached, touching his shoulder. Your father is right, she said softly. The real victory isn't destroying Richard Thompson. It's having built all of this in spite of him. It's being a better man than he ever could be. Michael felt the anger slowly being replaced by something else. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was understanding. Understanding that revenge wouldn't bring back the lost time. All right, he said finally, I won't go after him. But I won't let him keep attacking me either. Fair, Walter agreed. Defend yourself, protect what you've built. But don't let hatred consume you like it consumed him. There was a knock on the door. Robert entered, looking nervous. Dr. Michael, sorry to interrupt, but the guests are getting impatient, and there's one more thing. What? Michael asked, exhausted from all the revelations. There's a gentleman outside who insists on speaking with you. Says it's urgent. A certain Richard Thompson. The silence that fell over the room was heavy enough to be felt. Michael looked at his father, whose face had lost all its color. He's here, Walter whispered. How did he know? He must have seen the press coverage of the opening, Catherine suggested. He must have come to cause trouble. Michael straightened his shoulders, a cold determination settling in his eyes. Let him in, he ordered Robert. Michael, no. Walter grabbed his son's arm. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, Michael said calmly. If not now, when? He'll keep haunting us until someone faces him. Robert hesitated, but upon seeing the determination on Michael's face, he nodded and left. Moments later, the door opened again and a man entered. Richard Thompson was about 70 years old, with completely white hair combed back, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of arrogance that seemed permanent on his face. His eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly on Walter before fixing on Michael. Michael Johnson, he said, his voice full of false cordiality. Finally we meet, face to face. Mr. Thompson, Michael replied, keeping his voice neutral. I don't recall inviting you. Ah, but I didn't need an invitation, Alberto smiled, but it was a cruel smile. I have certain rights to this land. You have no rights, Michael said firmly. I bought this land legally. All the papers are in order. Yes, yes, Richard waved his hand as if brushing the comment aside, but you know where this land originally came from, don't you? His eyes turned to Walter. I see you've had a reunion with the former owner. Walter stepped forward, and for the first time in years there was something besides fear in his eyes. There was anger. You have no right to be here, she said with a voice trembling with emotion, after everything you did. I did? Richard pretended to be surprised. I just did business. It's not my fault if you were too foolish to understand the terms. You cheated him, Michael intervened. It was a fraud from the beginning. Richard shrugged. Prove it, he challenged. It was over 40 years ago. There are no documents, no witnesses. It's the word of an old beggar against mine. Watch what you say. Michael took a threatening step toward Richard. Or what? Richard didn't back down. You'll sue me. With what evidence? Expose me publicly. And expose the fact that your dear father was a failure who lost everything because of greed. It was love, Walter said, his voice breaking. I did that for love of my family. And look where that got you. Richard looked Walter up and down with disdain. Alone, sick with nothing, while I built an empire. An empire built on lies and theft. Catherine spoke for the first time, and there was contempt in her voice. Richard looked at her, apparently noticing her for the first time. And who are you? Someone who knows exactly who you are, Catherine answered, and who has documents proving your frauds over the years. For the first time, a crack appeared in Richard's confident facade. What documents? Catherine opened the purse she was carrying and took out a thin folder. "Walter wasn't your only victim," she explained. "Over the years you cheated many people, and some of them kept records. I found them, talked to them, gathered the evidence." Michael looked at Catherine with surprise and admiration. "You investigated him?" "I started years ago," Catherine admitted. "When Walter told me what happened, I promised that one day I would make Richard pay. But it had to be at the right time with enough proof." Richard laughed, but there was nervousness in the sound. "You're bluffing," he said. "There is no proof." Catherine opened the folder and began to read. 1983, you cheated the Mitchell family about a property in Boston. 1987, you forged documents to take Joseph Smith's business. 1992, you used insider information to... "Enough," Richard interrupted, his voice louder than he intended. "Where did you get this?" "Places." Catherine smiled coldly. "People you hurt held a grudge, and when they learned someone was gathering evidence against you, they were more than happy to contribute. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." Richard looked between the three of them, calculating his options. His arrogant expression had disappeared, replaced by something more like poorly disguised panic. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Money? I can pay." "We don't want your money," Michael said. "We want justice." "Justice?" Richard laughed bitterly. "There is no justice. There is only power, and I have more power than the three of you combined." "You had," Catherine corrected. "But that was before I sent copies of these documents to certain journalists, and to certain tax authorities, and to certain competitors of yours who would be very interested in this information." Richard's face turned red with anger. "You wouldn't dare." "I already have," Catherine replied calmly. "The messages were sent an hour ago. You should start seeing the consequences tomorrow morning." Richard lunged at Catherine, but Michael intercepted him, pushing him back. "Don't touch her," Michael warned, his voice dangerously low. Richard staggered, holding onto the table to keep his balance. He looked at Michael with pure hatred. "You," he spat, "you're just like your father, weak, sentimental. You'll lose everything just like he lost." "I won't," Michael said with conviction, "because unlike you, I built my empire on truth, in all honesty, and that's something you can never take away from me." Richard looked around, realizing he had lost. There was no way out. There was no way to undo what Catherine had done. "This isn't over," he threatened, but his voice lacked conviction. "I have lawyers, contacts." "Who won't be able to help you when the truth comes out," Catherine interrupted. "Your days of destroying people are over, Richard." Richard stood there for another moment, as if waiting for some miraculous change in the situation. When he realized there was none, he headed for the door. He stopped on the way, looking at Walter one last time. "You should have stayed hidden," he said with malice. "At least then you would have died in peace." "I will die in peace," Walter replied, and there was a serenity in his voice that wasn't there before. "Because I will die knowing that my son knows the truth, that he knows he was always loved. You, on the other hand, will die alone, knowing you built everything on lies." Richard left without another word, slamming the door behind him. The silence that remained was broken only by Walter's heavy breathing. "Father," Michael said quickly as he saw the elderly man stagger, "are you all right?" "I am," Walter nodded, leaning on his son's arm. "For the first time in 42 years, I am truly all right." Catherine put the folder back in her bag, a satisfied smile on her face. "You waited a long time for this," Michael observed. "It was worth it," she replied. "To see the look on his face when he realized he had lost. It was worth every minute of waiting." Michael helped his father sit down again, noticing how exhausted he looked. The confrontation with Richard had drained his already limited energy. "You need to rest," Michael said with concern. "No," Walter shook his head. "Not yet. You have a party out there, guests waiting. Don't let Richard ruin your moment." Michael looked at his father, then at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. "All right," he agreed. "But you're coming with me. I want to introduce you to everyone. Like this? Walter looked down at his worn-out clothes. I'm not exactly presentable. Michael took off his own suit jacket and placed it over his father's shoulders. Now you are, he said with a smile. Walter touched the fine fabric of the jacket, his eyes welling up again. Thank you, son. They left the office together, Michael supporting his father with one arm, Catherine on the other side. Robert followed them, keeping a respectful distance. When they reached the main hall, the buzz of conversation gradually died down. The guests turned to look, curiosity evident on their faces. Some began to whisper as they recognized the shabby old man walking next to the party's host. Michael led his father to the small stage in the center of the hall, where a microphone was set up for the opening speech. He picked up the microphone with a steady hand, looking out at the crowd of familiar and unfamiliar faces. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his amplified voice echoing through the hall. "I know you've been waiting for some time, and I thank you for your patience. Tonight was supposed to be only about the opening of this hotel, but it has become about something much more important." The guests moved closer, intrigued. Jennifer, his ex-wife, was in the front row, her eyes fixed on Walter with curiosity. "Most of you know me as Michael Johnson, businessman, builder of this hotel," Michael continued, "but few know the full story. Few know about the man standing beside me now." Michael placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "This is Walter Johnson, my father. A man I believed to be dead for 42 years, a man who I learned today sacrificed everything for me." A murmur went through the crowd. Cell phones were raised. Cameras began to record. Michael realized this moment would be news, but he didn't mind. "I built this hotel believing I was creating something from nothing." Michael looked around. "But I discovered that, in fact, I was completing a dream that began over 40 years ago. This land belonged to my father. It was where he planned to build a house for our family." Walter squeezed Michael's arm, too emotional to speak. "He lost this land because he tried to give us a better life," Michael continued. "He was deceived, robbed, forced to flee to protect us. And all that time I blamed him. I believed he had abandoned us." Michael's voice broke slightly, but he composed himself. "But he never abandoned us. He watched from afar, protected us when he could, loved us when he couldn't be present. And today, I discovered that the greatest gift a father can give a son isn't being present every moment. It's doing whatever is necessary to ensure that son can live." There were tears in many eyes now. An elderly lady in the audience was wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. A businessman Michael knew by sight had a tight jaw, clearly moved. "So today," Michael raised his voice, "today we are not just opening a hotel. We are opening a new chapter. We are proving that it's never too late for the truth, it's never too late for forgiveness, and it's never too late for family." He turned to his father. "Dad," he said clearly into the microphone, "welcome home." The crowd erupted in applause. Walter covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Michael hugged him, holding him as he cried out years of pain and loneliness. When they finally separated, Michael saw that even Robert, the security guard who had treated Walter so rudely before, was wiping his eyes. Now, Michael turned to the crowd, a genuine smile on his face. "Let's celebrate. Not just this hotel, but family, truth, and the new beginnings life gives us." More applause, more cameras. But Michael wasn't paying attention. He was looking at his father, seeing the pride and love in his tired eyes. Catherine came up on stage, bringing a chair for Walter to sit on. The elderly man thanked her with a nod, clearly exhausted, but radiant with happiness. "You gave a beautiful speech," she said to Michael. "I spoke from the heart," he replied simply. The party continued around them, but Michael remained by his father's side, not wanting to waste a single moment. Guests approached, greeting Walter, hearing fragments of the story. Each one left visibly touched. Jennifer was one of those who approached. She looked at Walter kindly. "Mr. Johnson," she said respectfully, "it's an honor to meet you. Michael spoke about you sometimes when we were married, always with so much regret. And now?" Walter asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Now," Jennifer looked at Michael. He can speak with love." She said goodbye shortly after, leaving father and son alone again. But not for long. A line had formed, people wanting to meet the man behind the moving story. A gentleman with grey hair, looking about 70, approached. He studied Walter for a long moment before speaking. "Walter?" The voice was hesitant, disbelieving. "Walter Johnson from Springfield." Walter looked at the man, his eyes widening in recognition. "David Williams." "It's me," the man laughed, a mixture of joy and disbelief. "My God, I thought I'd never see you again. I thought that... well, I heard rumors." "How do you two know each other?" Michael asked, curious. "Know each other?" David laughed. "We were best friends. We grew up together, worked together, until one day he just disappeared." Walter looked down, guilt evident on his face. "I'm so sorry, David. I wanted to get in touch so many times, but—" "I know," David interrupted, touching his friend's shoulder. "Catherine told me. She came to me a few years ago, asking questions about you. She didn't say much, but she said enough for me to understand that you were alive and had your reasons. You knew." Michael looked at Catherine with surprise. "You found his friends?" "I tried to find everyone I could," Catherine admitted. "I wanted to be sure that when the time came, Walter would have people by his side." David sat down next to Walter, and the two men began to talk, filling in the gaps of lost decades. Michael watched, amazed at how his life had completely changed in a matter of hours. More people approached. A lady named Rose, who had apparently worked with Walter years ago. A couple, Charles and Betty, who lived in the same boarding house as him in New York City. Each one had a piece of Walter's story. Each one had been touched by him in some way. "How many people did you find?" Michael asked Catherine during a pause. 15, she answered. "Over the years. Some didn't want to come, still hurt by his disappearance. Others are no longer here. But these who came, they care about him." Michael looked around, seeing his father surrounded by people who clearly loved him. After 42 years of solitude, Walter was surrounded by affection. "Thank you," Michael said to Catherine, "for everything you did for him, for us." Catherine smiled, gently touching Michael's face. "I told you once that I loved your father," she said softly, "and it was true. But over the years, I realized my love for him evolved into something different. Brotherly love, perhaps. The love of someone who sees another suffer and wants to help. And you helped." Michael held her hand. "More than you know." The evening continued, transforming from a formal opening into a warm gathering. People forgot about the elegance of the place, the sophisticated canapes, the expensive champagne. Only the human connections mattered, the shared stories, the raw emotions. At a certain point, Michael noticed that Walter was visibly getting tired. His eyes were beginning to close, his head nodding forward. "Dad," he called softly, "shall we go somewhere quieter?" Walter nodded, grateful. Michael helped him up, supporting him as they walked. He took him to the elevator, going up to the top floor where the presidential suite was. "This was supposed to be my suite tonight," Michael explained as he opened the door. "But it's yours now." Walter entered, looking in wonder at the luxury around him. The suite was enormous, with a spacious living room, a bedroom with a king-size bed, and a bathroom that was bigger than some apartments. "This is too much," Walter murmured. "I don't need all this." "I know," Michael smiled, "but I want you to have it. I want you to have, even if just for one night, everything you deserve." He helped his father take off the borrowed suit jacket and sit on the soft bed. Walter settled against the pillows, sighing deeply. "Michael," he called before his son could leave. "Sit here a while, please." Michael sat on the edge of the bed like he used to do when he was a child, and his father would put him to sleep. Long-forgotten memories came back with surprising clarity. "I used to tell you stories," Walter said as if reading his son's thoughts. "Before bed, do you remember?" "I'm starting to remember," Michael admitted. "Stories about a magical kingdom, about a brave prince." "You always wanted to be the prince," Walter smiled, his eyes shining with the memory. and you insisted that I be the wise king who guided you. And you were. Michael felt tears burning in his eyes. You always were. Even from afar, your choices guided me. They made me who I am. Walter held his son's hand. I'm so proud of you, he said, his voice choked with emotion. Of everything you've become, of the man you are, and I'm so sorry I wasn't there to see every step. But you were. Michael squeezed his father's hand. Now I know you were, and that changes everything. They stayed silent for a moment, just holding hands, father and son reconnected after decades apart. Can I ask you something? Michael broke the silence. Anything. The medical tests, Michael hesitated. How long did the doctors say you have? Walter took a deep breath. 6 months, maybe. If I'm lucky, a year. But without proper treatment, probably less. Then we'll get the treatment, Michael said firmly, the best that money can buy. Michael? No, Michael interrupted. You're not going to argue. I spent 42 years without you. I'm not going to waste a single day of the time we have left. Walter smiled through his tears. All right, he agreed, but on one condition. What? That you promise to live. Really live. Walter squeezed his son's hand. Not just work and build empires. Find love. Build a family. Be happy. Michael thought of Jennifer, of how their marriage had failed because he was always working, always trying to prove something, prove that he could succeed without a father. But now, knowing the truth, perhaps he could finally let go of that need. I promise, he said. I'll try. That's all I ask. Walter closed his eyes, clearly exhausted. Michael sat there, watching his father's face relax in sleep. All the wrinkles seemed deeper, all the pain of the past years etched into his skin. But there was also peace there, a peace he probably hadn't felt in decades. Michael stood up carefully, covering his father with a soft blanket. He stayed there for a few more minutes, just watching, memorizing every detail, afraid that if he closed his eyes, it would all disappear. Finally, he left the room quietly, closing the door softly behind him. He leaned against the hallway wall, letting all the emotions of the day finally hit him. He cried there, alone, tears of pain, joy, relief, and fear all mixed together. When he finally composed himself, he returned to the party. Many guests had already left, but there was still a sizable group, including Walter's friends, that Catherine had gathered. How is he? Catherine asked as soon as she saw him. Sleeping, Michael replied. Finally at peace, I think. And you? She studied his face. How are you? Michael thought for a moment. Scared, he admitted. I'm afraid I'll wake up tomorrow and find out it was all a dream. Or worse, that he won't wake up. He will wake up, Catherine said with conviction. That man survived 42 years of hell. He will fight to enjoy every moment with you. I hope so. Michael looked around. Where are his friends? David and a few others decided to stay in one of the hotel rooms, Catherine explained. They want to be close when Walter wakes up, spend time with him. Michael nodded, grateful for those people's presence in his father's life. The party ended late at night. The last guests left, leaving Michael, Catherine, and the hotel staff. Robert approached, still looking ashamed. Dr. Michael, he began, about earlier. The way I treated Mr. Walter. There's no excuse. You were doing your job, Michael said, echoing his father's words. And you learned an important lesson, I hope. I did, Robert nodded vigorously. I'll never judge someone by their appearance again. Good. Michael patted the man's shoulder. Now go home. It's been a long night. After everyone had left, Michael and Catherine were alone in the empty hall. Waiters collected glasses and plates, but they did so quietly, respecting the moment. Thank you, Michael said to Catherine. For everything. Not just for today, but for all these years. You don't need to thank me, Catherine replied. It was a privilege to know Walter, an even greater privilege to help him find the son he loved so much. Michael hugged her, a long, tight hug. You're part of the family now, he murmured. You always were. I just didn't know it. And I always will be, Catherine promised. When they separated, Catherine picked up her purse. I'm going home, she announced. You must be exhausted. I am, Michael admitted. But I don't want to sleep. I'm afraid of wasting time. Then don't sleep, Catherine smiled. Go sit by your father's side. Watch him sleep. Cherish every moment. Michael nodded. That was exactly what he wanted to do. After Catherine left, he returned to the presidential suite. He entered quietly, finding Walter still sleeping soundly. He dragged an armchair close to the bed and sat down, simply watching. The hours passed. The sky began to lighten through the large windows. Michael didn't move. He didn't want to move. He was there, present, as he should have been all those years. When the sun finally rose, casting golden rays through the room, Walter began to stir. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light. It took him a moment to recognize where he was, and then his gaze found Michael. You stayed here all night. It wasn't a question. I did, Michael confirmed, and I'll stay for as long as you'll let me. Walter smiled, tears forming in his eyes again. Then you'll stay forever, he said, because I will never let you go again. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out, now continuing. Michael helped his father sit up, arranging the pillows behind him. Walter looked out the window, watching the city wake up. It's beautiful from up here, he commented. I can see the square where I used to sleep. Michael followed his father's gaze, seeing the small tree-lined square a few blocks away. You slept there? He asked, his voice tight. For the last few months, yes, Walter nodded. Before that, I stayed in shelters, sometimes in cheap boarding houses when I could scrape together a few coins. But when I found out about this hotel, about the grand opening, I knew I had to be close, so I came here. And you stayed in the square, watching, Michael completed, gathering the courage to approach. It wasn't exactly courage I lacked, Walter corrected. It was permission, perhaps. Permission from myself to finally do what I had wanted to do for so long. And what made you decide to come last night? Walter touched his chest again, that gesture Michael was beginning to recognize. The pain, he admitted. It's been getting worse, and I knew I couldn't wait any longer. If I was going to die, it had to be knowing that you knew the truth. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. You're not going to die, he said, though he knew it was more wish than certainty. The best doctors will take care of you. Michael, Walter held his son's hand, even if the doctors perform miracles, even if I have a few more years, eventually I will pass on. That's the reality. I know, Michael admitted, his voice breaking. But I want every day, every hour, every minute we can have. And you will have them, Walter promised, but you also need to promise me something. Anything. When I pass on, you will move forward. Walter looked deeply into his son's eyes. You will live fully. You will love. You will build the family I always dreamed you would have. You won't bury yourself in work or in sadness. How can I promise that? Michael asked. I just found you. How can I promise I'll move forward when I lose you? Because you are strong, Walter touched his son's face, stronger than I ever was. You built all this without a father. Imagine what you can do with the memories and lessons we're going to share now. There was a soft knock at the door. Michael went to answer it, finding David on the other side. I hope I'm not interrupting, his father Walter's old friend said, but I brought breakfast. I thought you might be hungry. Come in. Michael opened the door fully. My father will be happy to see you. And he was. Walter's face lit up when he saw David enter with a tray loaded with bread, fruit, coffee, and juice. Always so helpful, Walter joked with his friend. Someone has to look after you, David joked back, since you spent 40 years refusing to let anyone else do it. The three had breakfast together, David and Walter reminiscing about old stories. Michael listened, fascinated, learning more about his father through the shared memories. I remember when you built that bench for the town square, David was telling. You said it was so mothers could sit while their children played. You worked on it for weeks in your free time. And when it was put in, Walter continued, smiling at the memory, the first person to sit down was a lady about 80 years old. She cried, said her legs couldn't take standing and waiting for her grandson anymore. You always thought of others, David observed. It was your nature. Michael realized he was getting to know a side of his father he'd never had the chance to see. Not the man broken by fear and circumstances, but the man he was before everything fell apart. The day passed quickly. Other friends of Walter visited, each one bringing more pieces of the puzzle of his father's life. Rose brought old photos, including one of Walter when he was Michael's age now. The resemblance was striking. Charles and Betty told about how Walter had helped them when they were going through financial difficulties, lending them money he knew he'd never get back. He said family wasn't just about blood, Betty recalled. It was about who was there when you needed them most. Each story painted a portrait of a good, generous man who, even in his own troubles, never stopped helping others. Michael felt pride growing in his chest, but also sadness for the loss of all that time. In the afternoon, Catherine arrived bringing a doctor. Dr. Mitchell was a renowned oncologist, someone Catherine knew personally. I brought the tests, Walter said to the doctor, handing over the yellowed folder with documents. Dr. Mitchell studied the papers carefully, his face growing more serious with each page. When were these done? He asked. 6 months ago, Walter replied. And there's been no treatment since then? I couldn't afford it. Dr. Mitchell sighed, but there was determination in his eyes. I'll be honest. He looked between Walter and Michael. The situation is serious, but not impossible. There are treatments, options that can prolong and improve the quality of life. How much time? Michael asked the question he feared. With proper treatment, constant care, Dr. Mitchell pondered. Perhaps 2 years, possibly more. Without treatment, a few months at most. Then we'll start the treatment immediately, Michael decided. Michael, Walter began. This will cost... I don't care about the cost, Michael interrupted. I would sell this hotel, all my companies, everything I have for more time with you. Dr. Mitchell smiled slightly. You won't need to sell anything, he assured, but the treatment will be intense. Chemotherapy, possibly radiation, specific medications. It will be difficult. He's strong. Michael looked at his father. He's survived worse things. Walter nodded slowly. I will fight, he promised. I promised my son I would have more time with him, and I will keep that promise. Dr. Mitchell began to explain the details of the treatment, but Michael was barely listening. He was looking at his father, memorizing every feature, every expression. No matter what the coming years would bring, they would face them together. When the doctor left, promising to return the next day with a detailed plan, Walter seemed exhausted but relieved. Thank you, he said to Michael, for giving me this chance. You gave me 42 years of life, Michael replied. It's the least I can do. Catherine, who had remained quiet during the consultation, finally spoke. I have a suggestion, she said. My house has a guest room on the ground floor. Walter could stay there during the treatment. It would be more comfortable than a hotel, and I could help look after him. Michael looked at her with gratitude. You've already done so much. And I want to do more, Catherine interrupted. Let me do this. Walter looked between the two of them. I don't want to be a burden. You never were, Catherine said firmly, and you never will be. It was decided then. Walter would stay with Catherine during the treatment. Michael would visit daily, spending as much time as possible with his father. That evening, Michael insisted on having dinner with his father in the suite. They ordered a feast from the hotel restaurant, far more food than 2 people could eat. But it wasn't about the food. It was about sharing a meal, about being present. Tell me about your mother, Walter asked as they ate. What was she like in her later years? Michael thought carefully before answering. She was strong, he began. Worked hard to raise me, never complained. But there was a sadness in her that never completely went away. Did she say anything? About me? Before she passed? Michael shook his head. No. Until the end, she stuck to the story that you had abandoned us. Maybe she thought she was protecting me, or maybe it was too painful to admit the truth. I loved her, Walter said softly. I want you to know that. I always loved her. And she loved you, Michael assured him. In her own way, even with the hurt, she loved you. She kept a hidden picture of you. I found it after she passed. It was worn, as if it had been looked at many times. Tears streamed down Walter's face. I wish I could have said goodbye to her, told her I was sorry. She knew. Michael held his father's hand. Deep down, she knew. They continued talking through the night, filling decades of silence with words. Walter talked about the jobs he'd had over the years, the cities he'd lived in, the people he'd met. Michael shared his own experiences, his successes and failures, his dreams and fears. You said you got married, Walter observed, and divorced. Was there anyone after? Michael shook his head. No. I buried myself in my work. It was easier than risking getting hurt or hurting someone again. But that's not living, Walter pointed out. I know, Michael admitted. It's something I need to change. Then change it, Walter encouraged. You have so much to offer. Don't waste it on fear. Michael promised to try, though he didn't know how to begin. Spending so many years protecting himself had left deep marks. As the night wore on, Walter began to doze off in his chair. Michael helped him back to bed, but this time, instead of staying in the armchair, he lay down next to his father like they did when he was a child and had nightmares. "Dad," he called out in the dark. "Yes, son?" "I love you." The words came out, simple but profound. "I always loved you, even when I thought I hated you." Walter's hand found Michael's in the dark. "I love you too," he replied. "I never stopped. Not for a second." They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, a comfort neither had felt in decades. Michael woke with the sun streaming through the window. For a terrible moment he thought it had all been a dream, but then he felt his father's hand still holding his, and relief washed over him. Walter was still asleep, his breathing heavy but regular. Michael watched him for a moment, then stood up carefully so as not to wake him. He went to the window, looking out at the city below. Everything seemed different now. The same streets, the same buildings, but with a new meaning. That was the city where his father had suffered, but also where he had loved from afar, where he protected even without being able to be present. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Catherine. "How was your night?" Michael replied. "Better than any night in the last 42 years. There was a pause then. "I prepared the guest room. Whenever you're ready, you can come." Michael looked at his sleeping father. Part of him wanted to keep Walter there in the hotel where he could always see him, but he knew that Catherine's house would be better for the treatment, more welcoming, more personal. Walter woke up a little later, looking more rested. "Good morning," he greeted, his voice stronger than in previous days. "Good morning, Dad," Michael smiled. "How do you feel?" "Better," Walter said, sitting up and stretching. "For the first time in a long time, I woke up without that weight on my chest. The weight of the lie, of the secret." "Catherine prepared a room for you," Michael informed him. "Whenever you want, we can go." Today, Walter decided, the sooner we start the treatment, the better. They had breakfast, and then Michael helped his father downstairs. There weren't many possessions to take, just the clothes he was wearing and the old backpack he had brought. "It's all I have," Walter said, almost apologizing. "It's not," Michael corrected. "You have a family now. You have friends. You have a home." They went down to the lobby, where David and the other friends were waiting. They had arranged to accompany Walter to Catherine's house, wanting to make sure he settled in well. Robert was at the front desk. Seeing Walter, he approached quickly. "Mr. Johnson," he said respectfully, "I hope to see you back soon." "Thank you, son," Walter shook the security guard's hand, "and thank you for looking after my boy." "It's an honor," Robert replied sincerely. The group set off for Catherine's house, which was in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. It was a modest but cozy house, with a well-kept garden in the front. Catherine was waiting for them at the door, a warm smile on her face. "Welcome," she said to Walter, hugging him gently. She guided them to the guest room, which she had prepared with care. There were fresh flowers in a vase, light curtains that let in the sunlight, a comfortable bed with clean sheets. "It's perfect," Walter said, visibly moved. "There's an adjoining bathroom," Catherine showed him, "and the kitchen is right over there. Please make this house your home." Walter sat on the bed, running his hand over the soft blanket. Michael could see tears forming in his eyes. "I don't remember the last time I had a room of my own," he admitted, "a place to call my own." "Now you do," Michael knelt beside his father, "and you will have it for as long as you need." Walter's friends eventually left, promising to visit often. Michael also prepared to leave, knowing he had business to attend to at the hotel. "You'll be fine," Catherine assured them both. "I'll take care of him." "I know," Michael hugged her. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," Catherine replied simply. Michael said goodbye to his father with a long hug. "I'll be back tomorrow," he promised, "and every day after that." "I know," Walter smiled. "Go on, take care of your business. I'll be here when you get back." Michael left the house, looking back one last time to see his father at the window, waving. It was an image he would keep forever. The days that followed established a new routine. In the morning, Michael took care of business, making decisions about the hotel and his other companies. In the afternoon, he visited his father. They talked, sometimes in silence, just enjoying each other's company. The treatment began. The first chemotherapy sessions were difficult. Walter would turn pale, nauseous, exhausted, but he never complained. He always said it was worth it, for the extra time with his son. Michael was there at every appointment, holding his father's hand during the infusions, talking to distract him from the pain. Catherine prepared special soups, herbal teas, anything that could help. David and the other friends visited regularly, bringing stories, laughter, life to the difficult days. Catherine's house transformed into a center of warmth and affection, very different from the loneliness Walter had known for so long. 3 weeks after the treatment started, Michael received an unexpected call. It was Jennifer, his ex-wife. "Michael," her voice was hesitant, "I know this might seem strange, but I've been thinking a lot about you, and about your father." "How is he?" "Fighting," Michael replied, "but with hope." "I'm glad to hear that." There was a pause. I would like to see him, if you think it's appropriate." Michael thought for a moment. Jennifer had been part of his life for years, and although the marriage hadn't worked out, she deserved to know about this fundamental change. "Of course," he agreed, "whenever you want." They scheduled for the next day. Michael told his father about Jennifer's visit. "Was she good to you?" Walter asked. "She was," Michael admitted. "I was the one who wasn't good to her. I was always working, trying to prove something. To myself, I guess. And now?" Walter tilted his head, observing his son. "What do you feel for her?" Michael thought carefully. "Affection," he answered finally. "Respect. But not romantic love, not anymore. That ship has sailed a long time ago." "Then tell her that," Walter advised. "With kindness, with honesty, she deserves it." When Jennifer arrived the next day, Michael greeted her in Catherine's living room. Walter made a point of meeting her personally, despite being tired from the treatment. "Ma'am," Walter greeted, kissing her hand in the old-fashioned style. "It's a pleasure to meet someone who was important to my son." Jennifer blushed slightly. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Johnson. Michael has been talking a lot about you lately." "Has he?" Walter looked at his son with a smile. "Yes," Jennifer confirmed, "about how brave you are, about the stories you share. I see a change in him, a good change." Walter nodded, satisfied, before excusing himself to rest, leaving the ex-spouses alone. There was an uncomfortable silence for a moment. "You look different," Jennifer observed. "Lighter, somehow." "I feel different," Michael admitted. "Spending your whole life carrying anger and abandonment, when that disappears, it leaves room for other things." "Like what?" "Forgiveness, understanding, love." Michael looked at her directly. "Jennifer, I need to tell you something." She waited, her hands clasped in her lap. "I am sorry," Michael began, "for everything I wasn't during our marriage. You deserved a present, loving husband, and I was so caught up in my own issues that I couldn't be that." "Michael, let me finish," he requested. "You have found someone, and I am genuinely happy for you. You deserve to be happy, and I hope that somehow we can be friends. Not in the sense of pretending everything is fine, but in the real sense. People who care about each other, even if not romantically." Jennifer had tears in her eyes. "I would like that," she said softly. "Very much, and thank you for setting me free with your words. I carried guilt, you know, for not being able to make our marriage work." "It wasn't your fault," Michael assured. "We were two wrong people at the wrong time, but that doesn't mean there was no love. There was. It just wasn't enough." They talked for another hour, healing old wounds, laying the foundation for a genuine friendship. When Jennifer left, there was peace between them that hadn't existed for years. Michael entered his father's room, finding him awake, looking out the window. "She's a good woman," Walter commented. "She is," Michael agreed. "She just wasn't the right woman for me." "And is there someone who is?" Walter asked, looking at his son. Michael thought of all the women he had known over the years. None had truly touched his heart. But now, with all this change, perhaps he was finally ready. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think I'm open to finding out now." Walter smiled. "Good. Very good." The months passed. The treatment continued with ups and downs. Some days Walter was full of energy, laughing and telling stories. Other days he could barely get out of bed. But through it all, Michael was there. He reshaped his life around his father. He delegated more responsibilities at work, spent less time at the office and more time at Catherine's house. He learned to cook his father's favorite dishes, to read to him when he was too tired to hold a book, to simply be present. Catherine watched it all with quiet satisfaction. Seeing father and son reconnected, rebuilding what had been lost, was the reward for all the years of waiting and planning. One day, 4 months after the treatment began, Dr. Mitchell arrived with news. "The latest tests show improvement," he announced, barely containing a smile. "The tumor is shrinking. It's not a cure, but it's significant progress." The room erupted in joy. Michael hugged his father, both crying tears of relief. Catherine applauded. David and the other friends present celebrated. "How long?" Michael asked the doctor. "How much more time do we have?" Dr. Mitchell pondered. "If we continue like this, possibly several years. The disease is still there, but under control. With careful monitoring and continued treatment." "We have time," Walter finished, looking at his son. "We have time." And so it was. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, each one precious, each one a gift. Michael began to document everything. He recorded his father's stories, took photos, created tangible memories. He didn't want to forget a single moment. One afternoon, while looking through an old photo album that Catherine had kept, Walter stopped at a specific picture. "This was taken a week before I left," he said, touching the photo delicately. It was a family photo. Walter, his wife, and a young Michael. Everyone smiling, unaware of what was to come. "Look how happy you were," Walter pointed to the young Michael. "Innocent, without a care." "I was happy," Michael looked at the photo. "You gave me that. Even if briefly. I wish I could have given more." "You did," Michael turned to his father. "You are giving it now. Every day, every conversation, every memory. It's more than I ever expected to have." Walter hugged his son, and they stayed like that for a long moment. "You know what I regret the most?" Walter asked when they separated. "What?" "Not seeing you become a father," he admitted. "Not knowing my grandchildren." Michael felt a weight in his chest. He wanted that too, desperately. But at 48, single, focused on work, it seemed like a distant dream. "I still can," he said, more to himself than to his father. "There's still time." "There is," Walter held his son's face. "And you should. Not for my dreams, but for your own. You would be a wonderful father." Michael promised to think about it, and he did. A lot. Life continued its pace. The hotel prospered. Michael's companies grew. But he maintained the balance, never letting work consume his time with his father. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the treatment had begun, Michael took his father to visit the land where the family house used to be. Nothing of the original structure remained there anymore. Everything had been demolished and rebuilt over the years, but Walter stood still, looking around, his eyes distant. There, he pointed to a corner. That was going to be your room, with a large window where the morning sun would come in. Your mother wanted you to wake up with natural light. And there, he pointed elsewhere, a garden. Your mother loved flowers. She was going to plant roses, jasmines, everything you could imagine. Michael listened, visualizing what could have been. And in that corner, Walter continued, his voice choked up, a swing, for me to push you, to hear you laugh. We still can, Michael said suddenly. Not here, but somewhere. We can build that house, exactly as you planned. Walter looked at his son, surprised. It's too late for that. It's not, Michael insisted. It's never too late. Let's build the house you dreamed of, and I will live there. And when, one day, if I have children, they will grow up there. They will play on that swing. They will see those roses. Walter began to cry, deep sobs shaking his fragile body. You would do that for me? For us, Michael corrected. For all of us. For the family we were, we are, and we will be. And so, a new project was born. Michael bought a plot of land on the outskirts of the city, a quiet place with old trees and a nearby stream. He brought the original drawings Walter had made decades ago, yellowed and fragile but still legible. He hired the best architects but insisted they follow every detail of the original plan. The room with the large window, the garden for flowers, the swing in the corner. Walter followed the construction, visiting the site whenever he had the energy. Seeing the old dream come to life gave him strength to carry on. Catherine, seeing the transformation in both of them, suggested something. Why don't we make a duplex house, she proposed. One part for you and Walter, another for me. That way I can continue helping. Michael loved the idea. The project was expanded, creating 2 connected houses, each with its own privacy. David and the other friends also offered to help. David, who had worked in construction his whole life, personally supervised parts of the work. Rose planted the first roses in the garden. Charles and Betty chose the fruit trees. It was more than a construction. It was a community forming, a family by choice as much as by blood. The construction took months. During that time, Walter's treatment continued. There were bad days, days when the pain was intense, days when the fear of not seeing the house finished haunted him. But Michael was always there, encouraging, supporting, loving. Finally, almost a year after the reunion, the house was ready. It was exactly as Walter had dreamed, welcoming, full of light, with love in every brick. The housewarming was a small, intimate party, just the family, by blood and by choice. Walter cut the ribbon, his hands trembling not from illness but from emotion. "Welcome home," Michael said to his father as they crossed the threshold together. Walter entered, looking around in wonder. Every detail was as he had imagined. The room with the large window, the spacious kitchen, the living room with a fireplace, the garden blooming outside. "It's perfect," he whispered. "Exactly as I dreamed." They moved in the following week. Catherine to her side of the house, Michael and Walter to the other. For the first time in decades, Walter had a real home. The weeks that followed were peaceful, full of simple but meaningful routines. Breakfast together in the sunny kitchen, walks in the garden, evenings around the fireplace, telling stories. Michael brought his work routine home as much as possible, setting up an office where he could work without being far from his father. Walter, on days when he felt well, cooked, tended the garden, lived. On one such afternoon, as Walter was watering the roses, Michael received an unexpected visitor. She was a woman, appearing to be around 40, with brown hair tied in a ponytail and gentle eyes. She seemed nervous, hesitant. "Can I help you?" Michael asked. My name is Samantha," she introduced herself. "I'm a journalist. I covered the opening of your hotel that night when you found your father." "Ah, yes," Michael vaguely remembered seeing reporters there. "And what can I do for you, ma'am?" "I wanted to write a story," Samantha explained, "about you and your father, about finding family when you least expect it, about second chances." Michael hesitated. Part of him wanted to keep that private, sacred, but another part thought about how many people could benefit from the story. "Let me talk to my father," he decided. "If he agrees, we can do it." Walter, when consulted, surprised Michael by accepting. "If our story can give hope to someone," he said, "then it should be told." Samantha returned in the following days, talking at length with father and son. She was sensitive, respectful, capturing not just the facts, but the emotions behind them. When the story was published a few weeks later, it was a phenomenon. People from all over the country wrote in, sharing their own stories of separated families, of reunions, of forgiveness. One letter in particular touched Michael deeply. It was from a man who hadn't spoken to his father in 20 years because of a silly argument. The story of Michael and Walter had inspired him to call his father. They had reconciled. "See," Walter said upon reading the letter, "something good came out of all our suffering." And it was true. More letters arrived. People searching for lost families, children forgiving parents, parents seeking children. The story of Walter and Michael had become a beacon of hope. Michael created a foundation in his father's name, dedicated to reuniting families. It offered resources for searches, mediation for conflicts, support for reunions. It was small at first, but it grew. Walter, despite his fragile health, got personally involved. He talked with people who had gone through similar separations, offered advice, shared his experience. "This gives me purpose," he said to Michael, "knowing that our pain can help others." The months kept passing. The second year after the reunion was approaching. Walter's treatment continued with mixed results. Some tests showed improvement, others did not. But he fought on day after day. One spring morning, Michael woke up early and went to check on his father. He found Walter already awake, sitting on the porch, watching the sun rise. "Couldn't sleep?" Michael asked, sitting down beside him. "I slept well," Walter smiled, "but I didn't want to waste this moment. Look how beautiful the sky is." Michael looked. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, the sun rising majestically on the horizon. "It's beautiful," he agreed. "Every sunrise is a gift," Walter said philosophically. "I never understood that before. When you're sure there will be another tomorrow, you don't appreciate today, but when every day could be the last—" "Don't talk like that," Michael interrupted. "It's not sadness," Walter looked at his son. "It's gratitude. Gratitude for every moment, every breath, every second with you." Michael held his father's hand, both watching the sun slowly rise in the sky. "I have a question," Walter said after a silence, "and I want an honest answer. Anything. Are you happy?" Walter looked deeply into his son's eyes. "Truly." Michael thought carefully before answering. "I am," he said finally. "For the first time in a long time, I am genuinely happy. I have you, I have Catherine and our friends. I have purpose. Yes, I am happy." "But," Walter sensed the hesitation. "But," Michael admitted, "sometimes I feel like something is missing. Someone to share all this with. Not you or Catherine, but a partner. Someone to love romantically." Walter nodded, understanding. "Then find someone," he encouraged. "You have so much love to give. Don't waste it waiting for the perfect moment. The perfect moment is now." Michael promised to try, although he didn't know where to begin. He had spent so much time focused on his work, and now on his father, that he had forgotten how to open himself up to romantic possibilities. Fate, however, had other plans. End of story. So, what did you think of this touching story? Let us know in the comments how you felt about this journey of reconnection and family love, and where you are watching from. Do you believe it's never too late to start over? Share your honest opinion with us. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that will touch your heart.